Hello, welcome everyone, and thanks for joining us today for our webinar series. Part one today is on attracting and retaining high-performing sales reps. Today's focus is going to be on attracting the right talent, and in today's market, that's no easy feat. Candidates aren't just looking at salary anymore, though as we will discover shortly, it is a key driver. They're evaluating flexibility, culture, leadership, and genuine career opportunities. So how do you position yourself as an employer of choice? That's exactly what we'll be covering. Here's what's on the agenda today. We will firstly dive into why you should craft a compelling base salary and commission package that attracts top tier sales talent. Make them achievable and transparent, and don't fall into the OTE skepticism trap. Then we'll unpack how to successfully manage and hire the hybrid workforce, balancing flexibility, accountability, and culture, and why it's important. We're lucky to be joined by some fantastic guests today. We have Simon Spalding, the director and founder of Uplift Recruitment, who's on the front line of what candidates are asking for right now. We have Scott Dunphy-Brown, founder and sales enabler at Sales Calibre, bringing his expertise on leadership and coaching strategies that set sales teams up for success. And Sam from SEEK, who's brought the latest data and hiring trends to give us a clear picture on what's really happening in the market. Together, we'll break down what's working, what's shifting, what practical steps you can take today to attract and keep the right talent. Sam, we might start with you and get your insight into what's really driving and attracting candidates to new roles, those that want to make a switch, and what's important for top performers.
Hi, Will. Thank you so much for having me today. I'm really excited to share some of SEEK's data. As you mentioned, I'm an account manager here at SEEK, and I work in the recruiter segment. So I'm lucky enough to have Uplift as one of my current clients. So one of the questions that Will asked me prior to today is how the drivers that attract our talent has changed, both pre and post COVID. So I thought I'd share this graph today, which gives a really good breakdown of what that looks like on the SEEK platform. So essentially you can see that those two top lines that really are showing a peak there, that's our work-life balance driver and also salary and compensation driver. Essentially, those two things have retained in the top two, both pre and post-COVID. So we know those two drivers are extremely important, and that's across all classifications and all states and territories in Australia. We have seen career development has popped up back into the top 5 in top drivers for candidates. So that's a really important one to recognise, especially when we're talking about, retention of staff or talent a bit later in this webinar. But in addition to that, we've also got management at number 4. Again, a really important note to consider when we're talking about retention. So there's some reasons that have impacted these shifts over the last few years. Essentially, technology changes. So obviously with technology now, a lot of people are able to work from home, whereas previously they may not have been able to. We've also seen a shift in expectations since the pandemic as well. The demographic structure has changed. So we've seen an increased volume of females re-entering the workplace, as well as a shift in generations as well, in addition to migration. So we're seeing a lot increased migration from culturally different backgrounds return, with those post-pandemic restrictions being lifted as well. Bill, did you have any other questions around this one particularly?
No, I definitely would love to dive into the laws of attraction for sales reps in particular.
Yeah, absolutely. So here you can see on the screen, I've listed what the top 2 drivers are for sales candidates. So first one being salary and compensation. No surprise there. We know our sales candidates are really highly motivated and driven by salary, essentially. So 70% of them consider a base salary as a must-have, which is a really good indicator that when we're, for example, advertising and looking for talent, that we want to ensure that we are advertising or letting them know what the base salary is. Will mentioned earlier about that OTE trap. We want to ensure that we're getting a full transparent picture of what that looks like when we're attracting talent. In addition to that, prioritising regular salary reviews throughout employment is really important. And they also really value paid overtime, which I also think ties into time in lieu as well. So the number 2 driver is work-life balance. So 20% of candidates value remote work options, which, as we saw in the last graph, has continued to stay really high as a driver, both pre and post-pandemic. 25% of candidates prioritise additional leave, and 25% do appreciate that time in lieu. So I've just included a screenshot on the right there as well with a link to Laws of Attraction. This is a SEEK database that all of our customers have access to. I think it's really important to note as well as a hirer, whether you're a direct hirer or a recruitment consultant, you are the expert in your field. You do already know what the top drivers are for your candidates. So really leaning on that knowledge, but then using that SEEK resource and database to cross-check what's currently sitting as a top driver to make sure you're targeting the right audience, but also, including the correct kind of content as well.
I think in the realm of sales, that sales transparency piece is so important, and clearly, you don't want to fall into that OTE trap. What sort of benefits does an employer have if they are conveying their salary and they are transparent around that?
Mm-hmm. I think when we look at salary transparency on the SEEK platform, we already know that more than 25% of candidates won't apply for a role until they can see a displayed salary. So there's some huge benefits in ensuring that you've got both a base salary plus your incentives or bonuses advertised on SEEK, for example. We know that the cost of living has had a huge impact on how candidates are moving in the market. People want stability, but they also need to know that their base salary is going to cover their cost of living as well. So I think those two things combined really has had a big impact on how people are approaching new roles. It's always nice to see what the OTE is, but having a base salary advertised, I would argue, is more important in this current market.
Amazing. Thanks, Sam. Those data insights, I think, really set the scene. It's clear transparency, especially around salary and earning potential, is a major priority for candidates. That brings me to you, Scott. From your perspective, working closely with sales teams with all the recent focus on salary transparency, are you surprised that there's still so much skepticism amongst sales staff, particularly around terms like OTE? And how do you see unrealistic commission promises or unclear earning potential affecting morale and trust within sales teams?
Yeah, thanks, Will. A great question. We certainly are seeing some skepticism still in that market, and I think it's driven by a couple of areas, especially when we look at stats at the moment are telling us that around 50% of salespeople are not going to hit target in 2025. So that stat says that there's more people not hitting their targets than are actually going to hit their targets. So sometimes those OTEs could be reflective of the lower percentage of the market that are going to hit target. So that drives a little bit in that skepticism that great OTE, but when I turn up, am I actually going to hit targets? Some of the other things that we've sort of seen is the targets are not achievable based on factors not within their control. And that still drives more skepticism. So, okay, you can tell me I can earn this potential, but when I turn up, I'm not supported or set up to succeed in the first instance. I have to carry a full quota right from the start. I don't have any tiered ramping. So they get a little bit concerned around how well they're set up to actually hit those targets. Some of the things that can address that or have an impact on that are things like the market fit of the product. So I know there's a lot more of startup and scale up businesses in the tech world, all your software as a service products. They're not quite at market fit yet. So they might still be in a minimal viable product stage. So the expectation is we'll give you a really high OTE to hit, but you're selling a product that's not addressing the client's challenges just yet. And that total addressable market and the lead potential to sell into that market. So I might have a product that I'm selling into a really, really small niche market, and there could be bigger competitors that I'm up against. So that ability to hit targets that are set may not be achievable.
So with that skepticism in mind, let's talk about what employers can control. How should they be positioning guaranteed income when they're trying to attract people to their business?
Yeah, I think it's being open about what is salary and what a tiered commission structure may look like when they're ramping towards targets. I think setting clear expectations around, well, here's the guaranteed income. The base salary is not as high in the percentage of what you're going to earn. We run on a higher commission structure, but also being clear on what the expectations are and how they can succeed. How is the business going to support them to actually succeed and hit those OTEs? So I don't think it's a matter of we have to shift our entire market to being higher base salaries and smaller OTE. I think it just comes with that transparency on this is the OTE potential. Here's who in the business are actually achieving it. Here's the team that aren't achieving it at the moment, but this is how we're supporting you to actually succeed and hit those OTEs. And the more transparency they give around that, I think that skepticism will reduce because they feel empowered to actually go and earn that.
I think, yeah, look, you're so right, but I do feel like that's where it gets a little bit tricky as well. If you've got a broad team of earners and they're all at different levels, you've got your star performer, maybe somebody that's consistent but is just hitting target, maybe somebody that, or a couple of people that are a little bit lower. Where do you start when it comes to setting the right level of salary transparency for new recruits?
Yeah, it's a tougher one to answer with an easy answer. I think when you got a broad scope of earners, it's setting it up based on what their expectations are. What are they actually tasked with doing? So, for instance, if you're a sales development rep versus an AE, then what are those tiered layers of the salary? What are the clear drivers of what you've got to achieve and what you can earn with that? I don't think you have to create a spreadsheet of everybody's salary so that they can see. I still think you need to be careful where you're sharing that information because that can reduce morale as well, especially if I think I'm a better seller than somebody else who's earning more than me. I think it's just being clear and transparent around how they actually earn the OTE, what are the things within their control and how are they supported. I think sharing that's okay. The rest of it is then showing how the others are succeeding and why they're at those OTE levels or at those base salary levels if they're sharing that as a factor.
Thanks, Scott. Some really great points, I think, around how clear communication and transparency around earnings, especially during the employment process or onboarding process, can really drive performance and motivation. I guess attracting high-performing sales reps starts even earlier. So before they're part of the team, it starts with how you position the role, particularly around base salary, commissions, and genuine earning potential. Simon, you are right in the thick of this every day, speaking to candidates who are weighing up multiple offers. From your perspective, what are some of the red flags that candidates immediately notice in commission structures or promises, things that might make them hesitate or walk away from a role?
Yeah, look, good question. I think in 2025, people are pretty attuned. I think since COVID, there's really been a big flip in people's obviously general outlook towards work. And, if we're talking sales, commission structures and base salaries and all of the things that Sam and Scott have kind of touched on. I think like ambiguity is a big one, where it's sort of, the OTE is XYZ, but there isn't much more talk about that. So I think probably the big ticket items for candidates would be like unrealistic targets, and ambiguity around that. So what they actually need to achieve to earn commission. Is anyone in the business actually doing that? What are your top performers doing? What are people achieving that are doing an above average job, and how many in the team are doing that? Is it 1 or 2 out of 10, or is it most of the team? Alongside that, I would say like delayed payouts and clawbacks. Depending on the industry, there can be clawbacks in sales. So again, from a candidate's point of view, they're looking at it going, well, I've put in blood, sweat, and tears to get all these sales into the business, and this clawback is out of my control. Like, what am I to do for this? So if I lose all my commission, what am I doing here? So that's a really tricky one, because the business are obviously trying to balance risk and profitability and all that as well. Delayed payouts. I mean, look, in our industry, Will, as you would know, we place people in roles. We offer a guarantee period, 3 or 6 months. And when we're structuring our commission structures, if we paid every single consultant immediately, even if it was after the client's paid, and then all the candidates that they place leave, we then have to go back to market and refill those roles, re-advertise, go through that process. So that's a really tricky one on both sides. But look, delayed payouts would definitely be one. And I just think that lack of transparency with like the performance metrics, and like how clear it is to actually achieve those sales targets, how they're tracked, how they're measured, and what the commission is also like based on. What are you paying commission for a sale, or is it based on gross profit and things like that?
So if that transparency, if there is ambiguity and that transparency is often lacking, I guess the next question is, how do employers fix that? In your view, how can a company better communicate genuine earning potential up front? Should they be providing the commission structure to candidates before they even start?
Yeah, look, absolutely. And as you know, we've got clients that do provide that information in advance, and we've worked with plenty of clients that don't provide that information in advance. There's one particular client that I think does this very, very well. They actually, when they get to the final stage, the managing director actually has a coffee catch up with the candidates and walks through the bonus and commission structure with the candidates and answers all their questions. Again, obviously, depending on the level of the role and how many people you're hiring, that might not be feasible to do every single time. But taking the time to actually do that, candidates, I think it speaks volumes for the type of employer that they're soon to be joining. So I think if there's a document that can be provided, and it's clear, and we can go through it with the candidates, or the company can go through it with the candidates in advance, actually take the time to explain it to them, because it's one thing to send something, but often people are, they want to get a job, so they're smiling, they're like, yeah, this looks pretty good, but they don't really understand it themselves, and they probably should be speaking up in light of that. Actually having that information at hand prior to them starting, so there is no ambiguity, it just prevents future arguments and misunderstandings and unmet expectations down the line, because the company's thinking, oh, well, I've sent it to them, they understand it, I've told them that they can earn X, Y, Z if they achieve, Y. But from the candidate's point of view, there's a lot of unanswered questions, and then you get to that point where there's this big misunderstanding that could have been completely avoided if it had been spoken about, in advance.
And once they've got that transparency piece in place, I guess, the next challenge is also balancing it with business reality. What advice would you give to an employer who is trying to offer a competitive package where they still need to manage costs and mitigate risk?
Yeah, great question. So I think obviously offering a strong base salary with those performance-based incentives, is critical. finding that alignment can be tricky, as I mentioned before, like depending on the industry, clawbacks as such, it is quite tricky. So I think aligning the overall commission structure with the business goals, setting realistic but challenging targets that ultimately will drive revenue and profitability would obviously be key, and structuring incentives around, you know, high margin products or reoccurring revenue, customer retention based stuff, again aligning with those goals that are achievable for obviously the staff members, but also, you know, you're protecting the overall business at the same time. You know, I think around obviously like capping on commission structures and things like that need to be looked at as well. Like it obviously will discourage candidates if they know that there's a complete cap. But if you go in as a business and offer an uncapped structure, and then you look back 6 months, 12 months down the line, and you're losing money because of that, you know, you're gonna need to let people go, and then you've got that, you know, a whole different problem obviously on your hands as well. So, you know, I think just reviewing it regularly, you know, every 6 months, I think sitting down, looking at like how many people in the business and the sales team are achieving target, how many are not, are the people that are not actually profitable, and if they are being profitable, maybe there's a tiered structure that you could come up with to incentivize some of the performers that aren't maybe absolute superstars, but are still doing a decent job. So that way you can retain them and build that retention internally.
Thanks so much, Simon. Really valuable insights into how commission structures and transparency can either attract or turn off candidates. It's clear that trust and clarity play a huge role from the start of the hiring process, but it's not just about salary and commissions anymore. One of the biggest shifts we're seeing in candidate expectations is around flexibility, specifically remote and hybrid work options. To give us a clearer picture of how this trend is playing out across the market, Sam's going to share some fresh data on the volume of job ads offering work from home options and how that's impacting both attraction and competition for top sales talent. Sam, over to you.
Thanks, Will. So as you said, flexible working is still a really important part of the landscape at the moment. This graph that I've included is work from home ads on the SEEK platform. So in 2023, we actually saw a peak in terms of the total job ads, including work from home references, which is now sitting around 9.5%. So there's only been a slight reduction in those work from home references in job ads on SEEK really since 2023. Essentially, we saw some really like high profile mandates in terms of return to work. However, we do know that that decline's been pretty modest overall. So we know from our voice of the customer that 53% of workers would prefer to work from home 2 or more days per week, and that stays very relevant in the current market as well.
Yeah, that's actually really interesting. And I think it's quite funny because there's obviously a lot of noise out there about companies pushing people back to the office, but the data clearly shows that, flexibility, especially work from home options, there's still a major draw card. Simon, from your perspective, are you seeing this reflected in candidate behavior in today's market? Do you think offering flexibility has become a deal breaker when it comes to attracting top sales talent?
I think, Will, to answer your question there, yes, I think it is, and again, it will fluctuate from industry to industry. You know, some industries, remote or hybrid working may have become the norm. So if your competitors are offering hybrid or remote structures and you're not, you may then be missing out on a large pool of people. You know, top sales professionals, obviously, they value things like autonomy in managing their own schedules and whatnot as well. So flexibility obviously would play a factor there. I think from a from a general productivity point of view, often sales roles involve, prospecting and CRM management, getting out and seeing clients and things like that. So again, they may be someone that will perform a lot better when they can have some at-home days, drill down and really focus on what they need to do. When you're in the office, look, that's great for team morale and, learning things and all that sort of stuff. But I think from a focus point of view, it can definitely impede on that for candidates as well. You've got geographical locations and things like that as well. Like there could be some star people in rural areas or semi-rural areas. A lot of people have moved since COVID out, outside of Sydney and whatnot. So, you might be missing out on a fantastic candidate that lives, up in the Blue Mountains, and they just can't get to the city every day. And I think probably one last thing to touch on would just be having that general flexibility, as Sam's pointed out, and as we've seen every single day, like having that just, at least if it's not maybe being offered in the beginning, it's something that could be built into their role 3 months or 6 months down the line. Yeah, just having that open conversation with candidates before they commence.
And once an employer has sort of made that decision, let's say it's an employer that doesn't normally offer that flexibility piece, and they want to start from top of funnel candidate level. How do employers ensure that they're choosing the right person, somebody who can be trusted to work from home?
Yeah, it's tough, isn't it? Because we've seen, I've seen people that are fairly junior, starting out their career, and they can work from home very, very well. And I've seen people that are really experienced, and have had, decades of experience in the workforce that can't work from home. Then there's so many factors that I think influence that, and it really does a lot of the time come down to the actual person themselves. But look, to probably better answer your question, you can obviously self-evaluate. So have they worked in a remote role or working from home before? What was the tenure in that previous roles or those previous roles where they obviously have done that? Digging into a little bit of what they like to do and their situation at home and all of those sorts of things. Do they have a cake decorating business, and that's the real reason that they want to work from home, and they're going to be, mailing cakes out to people while trying to balance sales and whatnot as well. But also, as I mentioned before, like putting them perhaps through some testing to see what their capabilities are to kind of work remotely and work by themselves, and are they a bit more of an introverted person that will work well like that, or are they extroverted and they get their energy from working around people? Because a lot of the time I think like an extroverted person might think they like the idea of working from home, and we saw this in COVID. Sam and Scott would absolutely be able to attest to this. People that in the beginning it sounded great, and then they absolutely dived bomb because of that. And it took them time, and their sales results got worse and worse and worse, and it could have been prevented kind of, in the beginning. But again, starting out, maybe seeing how they go, introducing, if it's something that's new to the business, introducing perhaps a day from home first. If it's something that they're not doing at the moment, one day, seeing how that works. If that impacts productivity, it might get better. And then moving towards an extra day or two if that's what the business and the candidate are looking for. So, it can be a staggered approach. It doesn't need to be all in from the very beginning.
Yeah, lovely. Thanks, Simon. Really insightful to hear how, I guess, these remote and hybrid trends are playing out on the battlefield and during the hiring process, and how much flexibility is factoring into a candidate's decision. But once you've hired remote or hybrid sales talent, or maybe you've got a hybrid team, the next big question is, how do you manage and support them effectively? Scott, from a leadership perspective, if you're an employer offering work from home or flexible working, how do you recommend measuring productivity in these remote environments?
Yeah, it's a very easy one from a work from home perspective in the sales field. Certainly, there's lots of lead and lag indicators that you can use through the CRM. So number of activities, number of calls, outbound, number of meetings booked, and so forth. And there's the later outputs. So how many are you closing? What's your close rate? Reasons around why you didn't close so many. So I think that's an easy one to measure. But and Simon's point around being clear on the admin requirements, we notice in sales that more salespeople are having to do more admin and less selling time. So they've got less time to sell and they have to do more of that admin stuff. So just looking at lead and lag indicators doesn't give you the full picture. And using time as a measure is not as critical. I think from a salesperson perspective, if I'm working from home, I should be trusted to put the time in where needed to actually drive the results and those indicators that I'm using. So it's very easy to measure that. Where it works best using those metrics is where you're coupling that with quality time with the leader or their manager, and also coaching. So if you're not providing that and you're just having conversations around why didn't you make enough calls, why didn't you book enough meetings, without that coaching piece or the time with the leader to talk through challenges in their pipeline, then it becomes a very stick-focused driver. And you'll start to see that productivity really start to wane if they feel like they're just getting smacked with the stick and not helping be supported in terms of, well, how do I move those metrics? How do I raise those to a successful level?
And how do you set up the right environment, where there's coaching and training and support?
Yeah, I think it's time with the leader, and that is a challenge for most businesses, because as soon as that salesperson reaches a leadership level, they get drawn into a lot of other activities around the business away from the team. And you'll often hear that rhetoric around, well, I never get time with my leader, I never get time with the manager. So a business that allows the leader to spend time on the front lines with their team, knowing how to coach the team effectively, because I think a lot of newer sales leaders think doing a pipeline review is a coaching session. So I think if you set up the right structures, you provide some training for the team around resilience. So the sales is that game that at the end of the month, you start from zero again. And you're just going to get rejected trying to call people or not get responses from your emails. So they've got to be really resilient and tough-skinned to get through those processes. So setting up those support functions to allow them to either air that or talk to their peers or talk to their leaders around why they're being rejected or what can they do differently so that they can up their conversion rates is a very, very big one. And then I think that trust piece is a huge one. Here are the metrics. Here's the clear expectations of what you've got to do. And trust me to go and do it, especially like Simon was saying, are they doing a cake business on the outside? Well, trust them that if you want a side hustle, that's okay. But these are the metrics and these are the outputs and inputs that you've got to manage from a sales perspective. But I'm going to trust you to do it. And I'm going to trust you to go and screw something up because it's a learning opportunity, not, something for me to smack you with.
And I think, of course, beyond coaching and support, there's also the challenge of what's lost when teams aren't physically together every day. What's your take on the impact of osmosis in the workplace, and how do you suggest leaders balance that in a hybrid setup?
Yeah, it's a huge one. I think you lose a lot of value not having your sales team in the same room. A lot of them will listen in on other people's calls. A lot of them will hear a discovery meeting or a demo and pick up a lot of tips and tricks naturally without having to ask the question. So you do lose a little bit of that from a work from home perspective. So some of the things I used to do with my sales team is we had designated work from home days. So when people were in the office, the whole team was in the office. When you're working from home, everyone is working from home. So that helped with that transition and not losing that natural learning that you get being in the environment. But running things like online blitzes. So if you're going to be doing cold calling, then everybody's cold calling. We're all on a meeting. We're listening into each other's calls. and we're providing feedback. Other things that I did were what I called working rooms online. So we are in an online meeting, but we're going about our day. So if I need to ask a question of anybody, rather than booking a 15-minute meeting, everybody's on the meeting. I can throw something in the chat to say, hey, Will, look, I got this customer. I know you had this challenge. Can we talk for 5 minutes? And that's an open chat that everybody can listen in on. Again, you're getting that osmosis and people listening in, oh, I didn't try that. Okay, I'm going to try that in my next one as well. So there's ways you can get around it, and then putting some fun and enthusiasm in a lot of the things that you do can also help. So putting in, I talk about those blitzes, but how do you gamify that? How do you put leaderboards in place, or a specific target they need to do today? And how do you run that through a chat as well, which then keeps them connected?
I actually love that. I could just picture a few sales guys sitting there, on a Teams, listening to someone closing a deal, and just hearing the hype and the claps once that gets across the line. Look, I think it's really clear that whether or not it's about setting the right KPIs, creating trust, or being intentional about team learning, managing hybrid and remote teams takes a much more thoughtful approach today. We've gone a little bit over time. It actually does bring us to the end of today's session. Definitely do want to quickly wrap up and do a bit of a recap. I think the key takeaways from today's discussion is that hiring and attracting high-performing sales reps isn't just about offering a competitive salary or a flashy title. It's about balancing security with opportunity, providing real transparency around earnings, and building flexibility into your offering without compromising on trust or accountability. We've seen through the data that Sam has shared, the trends that Simon is seeing on the recruitment front, and the leadership and training strategies that Scott has highlighted. It's clear that today's sales talent has high expectations, but the companies who meet them are the ones that are securing and keeping the best people. I'd like to say a big thank you to our guests, and I'll leave you with a few things to consider. Are you clearly communicating your base and commission structures in a way that builds trust? Are you offering the right balance of flexibility and structure to attract hybrid and remote candidates? And importantly, are you setting your sales team up with the trust, coaching, and environment they need to succeed? And we're going to provide the attendees of today's session with some data collected by SEEK and the lovely work that Sam has done on the top drivers and current salaries around sales roles. But if you'd like any extra information or help, feel free to find Scott, Simon, myself, or Sam. We're all active on LinkedIn. We'll also shoot around our contact details at the end of this session. So thank you again for spending time with us. Don't forget, we'll be back for part 2 of the series, where we'll be diving into retention strategies, how to keep your best sales talent once you've got them. Until then, feel free to connect with us or reach out if you'd like more resources or support. Thanks again, and we will see you next time. Thank you.